It sounds cold to say it, but war is tragic and civilians die. There is no war that this has not happened in the history of all of humankind. The statement that Israel might take care not to target civilians is not incompatible with a diary entry from someone who said they saw civilians getting killed. I think that sometimes we do a lot of weird games when we talk about international humanitarian law or laws that govern conflict, where we say things like civilians dying is a war crime, or civilian homes or hospitals getting destroyed is necessarily a war crime, or is necessarily somebody intentionally targeting civilians without making distinctions between military targets or civilian ones. I think that when we analyze different attacks or when we talk about the conduct of the military, I think it's important to understand, like prospectively from the unit of analysis of the actual military committing the acts, what's happening and what are the decisions being made, rather than just saying retrospectively, oh, well, a lot of civilians died, not very many, military people died, comparatively speaking, so it must have been war crimes, especially when you've got another side, I'll fast forward to Hamas, that intentionally attempts to induce those same civilian numbers, because Hamas is guilty of any war crime that you would potentially accuse, and this is according to Amnesty International, people that Norm loves to cite. Hamas is guilty of all of these same war crimes, of them failing to take care of the civilian population, of them essentially utilizing human shields to try to fire rockets free from attack. Essentially, yes. I'm just saying that essentially, as in terms of how international law defines it, not how Amnesty International defines it, but Amnesty International describes times of human shielding, but they don't actually apply the correct international legal standard.
You don't know what's the correct
I know, absolutely.
Law. You haven't the clue.
I absolutely
you
do.
haven't the clue.
I absolutely
I
do.
think,
but I'm just saying, believe it or not, Norm, the entire Geneva Convention is all on Wikipedia. It's a wonderful website. But I'm just saying that on the Hamas side, if there's an attempt to induce this type of military activity, attempt to induce civilian harm, that it's not just enough to say, like, well, here's a diary entry where a guy talks about how tragic these attacks are.
I think the problem with your statement is that if you go back and listen to it, the first part of it is war is hell, civilians die. It's a fact of life, and you state that in a very factual manner. Then when you start talking about Hamas, all of a sudden you've discovered morality. And you've discovered condemnation, and you've discovered intent, and you are unfortunately far from alone in this. I'll give you, you know who for me is a perfect example?
Well, wait, hold on. Just in response, we don't need examples.
So,
the false equivalency of the two sides is astounding. When Hamas kills civilians in a surprise attack on October 7th, this isn't because they are attempting to target military targets and they happen to stumble into a giant festival of people that...
Well, they did happen to stumble into it.
They did, but...
they killed 300
yeah, but they did. But when they stumbled into it, it wasn't an issue of trying to figure out a military target or not. They weren't failing in distinction. There wasn't a proportionality assessment done. It was just to kill civilians. Even the Amnesty International in 2008 and in 2014 and even today will continue to say that things like these types of attacks...
I don't think you'll find anyone who will deny that Hamas has targeted civilians.
Sure.
You gave the example
but there's a difference because
of suicide bombings during the Second Intifada. I mean, facts are facts.
Sure. But I'm just saying that the Hamas targeting against civilians is different than the incidental loss of life that occurs when Israel does.
How, genocide is the intentional mass murder.
Genocide is an entirely separate claim.
Yeah,
right?
But the idea that Israel is not in the business of intentionally targeting civilians, I know that's what we're supposed to believe. But the historical record stands very clearly.
I don't believe it does.
You've written about it yourself.
When you say historical, do you mean like in the 40s to the 60s, or do you mean like over the past, like
from the 30s of the last century to the 20s of this century? I just like to make the way you characterized it. I think the best example of that I've come across during this specific conflict is John Kirby, the White House spokesman. I've named him Testosterone for a very good reason. When he's talking about Palestinian civilian deaths, war is hell, it's a fact of life, get used to it. When he was confronted with Israeli civilian deaths on October 7th, he literally broke down in tears.
But he understood that one is deliberate and one isn't. He understood that.
No, that's what he tried to make us understand.
No, he was speaking facts. The Hamas guys who attacked the kibbutzim, apart from the attacks on the military sites, when they attacked the kibbutzim, were out to kill civilians, and they killed family after family, house after house. The Israeli attacks on Hamas installations and fighters. I don't know better. No, you don't know Israeli pilots. That's the problem.
Thank God.
You don't know
I
Israeli
know, thank
pilots.
God.
They believe that they are killing Hamasniks. They're given certain
sure they believe it.
objectives, and
I'm
that's
sure
what they
they believe
attack.
it.
And if the
I'm
Hamas
sure
is
they believe
hiding
it.
behind
I'm sure they
civilians,
believe
civilians
every
die.
time they
It's as
target,
simple as
every
that.
time they target a kid, I'm sure they believe it's Hamas.
They
When they
target
killed,
kids?
when they killed the 4 kids in the
They believe
yeah,
they
I
were
know they
Hamas
believe.